modern zoos are no longer living museums of an animal that you go to see in a little cage and oh cool, that's a tiger. You can check that off my list of things I've seen. Oh cool, an elephant, check that off. That's what zoos used to be. They were menageries, and you went to see just like you would go to the sideshows and at a county fair. We haven't been that for a long time, and zoos have become much more involved in the conservation of species that are rapidly disappearing.
The Phoenix Zoo has a number of conservation projects. They actually started with field conservation work back in 1962 with the Arabian oryx. And just as we opened the doors for Phoenix Zoo, we were approached by the United Arab Emirates on a project to try and save the Arabian oryx, which many people know as the unicorn.
We became the home of the world herd of Arabian oryx, which at that point had gone extinct in the wild. The Arabian oryx is part of our logo. It's part of our 50th anniversary logo. We kind of were the ark for the oryx.
But presently, what we do at the Conservation Center is work with local species conservation. And we have about 8 different species projects going on with narrow-headed garter snakes, Chiricahua leopard frogs, black-footed ferrets. We also work with Mount Graham red squirrel and 2 native fish species, the Gila top minnow and the desert pupfish. We work with 2 invertebrates, spring snails, and another species of mollusk called the California floater.
The narrow-headed garter snakes, they are a piscivorous species that eat fish out in the wild. So a lot of their fish have been replaced by introduced sport fish. In their streams, there's also introduced bullfrogs and crayfish that have been predating on the snakes, and therefore their numbers have been declining. So what we're doing here is we're working on breeding them and then re-releasing the babies back into the wild after head starting. But we also work with Fish and Game, U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service and the Forestry Service to rehab these streams. Get these non-native species out of there so that we don't have to worry about the predation and the loss of these guys in the wild.
The Chiricahua leopard frogs are an endangered native species from Arizona. They're in trouble because of invasive species like bullfrogs and crayfish that eat their young. And also there's various fungal diseases that they're having some trouble with.
We work closely with Arizona Game and Fish, bringing in egg masses that we can hatch here and then raise from a tadpole and then a froglet and release them all into the wild.
The problem with black-footed ferrets is that they live in the belly of North America and their natural habitat's being destroyed. So the prairie dogs, which they feed on, their primary food, they're going extinct.
There are currently only 6 places in the world that breed black-footed ferrets. We're one of them. And we breed for release. That's the only reason that we're here, the other 4 zoos, and the main center. 1996, we had our first release right here in Arizona. That is now considered to be one of the most successful sites. It's a self-sustaining site. We haven't had to release any ferrets there for, about 8 years now. And this is literally an animal that could come off the endangered species list within the next 10 years. The first mammal ever to do that. And it's because of the zoos that have worked hard.
One of the species we work with here is the Mount Graham red squirrel. We're interested in working with them because their numbers have dwindled down to about 213 or so in the last decade. Mostly because of a couple of stand replacing fires that occurred on the top of the Mount Graham. We're working with U.S. Fish and Wildlife to develop a pilot breeding program for these squirrels so that we can augment their wild population long enough for the recovery of the forest so that they'll begin to have the same kind of protection from predators and the amount of resources that they need.
We have the opportunity to breed black-footed ferrets in our Johnson Black-footed Ferret Breeding Center. We have the opportunity to receive emergency evacuations of very rare species like the Mount Graham red squirrel and the spring snails. And we also have a chance to head start critters like the Chiricahua leopard frog, and to do research on narrow-headed garter snakes. And so the reason that we're trusted with those animals is because we've built up a reputation of working really hard, communicating really well, and doing good work in the spirit of conservation, both regionally and beyond.
And the Conservation Center has developed a kind of a subgroup called the Zoo Teen Conservation Team.
The Zoo Teen Conservation Team is a special section of the bigger umbrella of the Zoo Teen program at the Phoenix Zoo. And it's just it's an outreach program where teens interested in conservation can learn more and be more active in the Conservation Center at the zoo.
And what they're able to do by participating in this team is we do a number of field conservation efforts in Arizona, and they're able to participate in those, such as black-footed ferret spotlighting. The group worked together to develop burrowing owl habitat that was for a local species of owl in Arizona. Field conservation efforts are where you're actually working with a species in support of it in its natural habitat in some way or another, or you're actually working to try and improve the natural habitat of a species.
They are eager to learn. They're excited to get into the field in any way that they can and see what they're interested in pursuing as far as their future. And so they actually are a wonderful resource and a great voice and representative of the zoo.
I've always cared about the natural environment, and I want to make sure that it's still there in several years.
It's really important to get the information out to the public that conservation is something we actually have to care about, because in the next 500 or so years, like, we don't know how many animals are going to be left.
Every single animal makes up like part of the food chain in the wild, and if one of them gets taken away, then it affects all the other ones. So you come to the zoo and you see all these other animals, and all of them depend on each other to survive. So some of the animals that we have here at the Conservation Center are the lifeline for some of the other animals that aren't at the Conservation Center.
We feel that it's important that the young people that are going to inherit the habitat need to be able to communicate that this is something that needs to be saved. Zoos are more than a place just to come to see animals in enclosures. Zoos are places now where you can learn about how animals live, what they need to survive in the wild. And more zoos are actively involved in making sure that these animals are surviving in their natural habitat.